What's up, y'all? Welcome back to From the Ground Up. Becky Allen here. And today's episode, y'all, we gonna get a little spicy. We're gonna challenge some things. But I really think this is an important one. It's an important topic to discuss. I just want to set expectations. I am not here to name names. I am not here to start a war. I am not here to litigate every single anatomical detail of a social media post I'm going to talk about today. What I am here to talk about is something I see happening over and over again, specifically in the pelvic health space. And that is that I feel like we do not know how to disagree with each other online. Okay? And let me just say, if we want to change the game in pelvic health, which I do, don't you? We have to do better than this, y'all. Here's kind of the big idea of today. We can hold strong clinical beliefs, y'all. We can challenge outdated narratives, and we can ask those hard questions all without tearing each other down or getting butthurt about it, okay? We can disagree. We can even strongly disagree. But if we are going to preach collaboration, nuance, root cause thinking, and ultimately better care for our patients, then we have got to practice that in how we treat each other as well. Because literally collaboration over competition, quote unquote, sounds adorable, sounds great. Yes, collaborate, right? But it gets tested when someone disagrees with you. So I just, it's interesting. It's interesting. So let's get into it. This week, there was a post on Instagram from a very well-known, well-respected PT in the pelvic health space. She works with a lot of active women, runners, lifters, women with prolapse, women with incontinence. And she made a post claiming that the iliums do not rotate and that is anatomically impossible. And frankly, that for the iliums to rotate, it means the pelvis has to fracture or the pubic symphysis has to rip apart, okay? And claiming that those of us using, mobile pelvis models to talk about this ilium motion, specifically ilium internal rotation, are flat out wrong and even causing harm to people watching the videos. And to be fair, she did ask people to watch her full video because the video she posted was, a 1-minute clip from the full thing. So I did. I watched the full video. And honestly, I'm just going to say it didn't answer the questions that I had, the questions that had come up whenever I watched the social media clip. Here were kind of my clarifying questions. I wanted to know, what are we actually claiming here? Are we saying the ilia literally do not move as in 0 degrees? Because you did say that. Are we saying they move so little that it's clinically insignificant? Are we saying that the models exaggerate ilia motion and that is the issue? Or am I missing the point altogether, right? Like, we have to be on the same page before we can even start, quote, debating these things. So I had these questions that I wanted to be clarified. What confused me was that she also acknowledged that the pelvic outlet can and does open. And if the outlet can open, then we need to talk about what is happening at the innominate, because that is one bone. Like, that is, the innominate is one solid bone. If the lower portion is moving outward, we have to have a conversation about what that means for the upper portion, the ilium, okay? But again, this episode is not actually about proving who was right in that exact debate, okay? This is kind of about what happened next, if you will. Next week, I am going to actually get into the anatomy and biomechanics of the pelvis and the ilia, so stay tuned for that. But today, that's not the point of this episode. I want to talk about social media is terrible at nuance, okay? It is not built for nuance. It is built for hooks. It is built for engagement. It is built to get people riled up. Love it or hate it, it is what it is, y'all. And pelvic health is honestly one of the worst fields to try and reduce to a 30-second reel because we are dealing with complex bodies, complex symptoms, complex histories, and complex clinical reasoning, okay? All the complexities. And listen, I am on social media. Like, I run my business on social media. I use hooks. I want that engagement because I want my work to reach people. But I use it as a way to point people to my context and nuance. I offer free resources. I offer paid resources. I teach my frameworks on a much more nuanced level. I want people to come deeper and understand the context behind my reels. But we have to remember, A reel is not going to be the whole conversation, y'all. A carousel is not the whole clinical framework, right? A comment section is not meant to be your mentorship space, okay? Instagram can be where we start the conversation, but it cannot and should not be the whole conversation. And hopefully we're all on the same page with that. But when we are using absolute language online, such as it's an anatomic impossibility for the ilia to rotate, we need to understand that people are going to ask questions. And if we are not willing to engage with those questions, we need to rethink our messaging and our goal of posting, frankly. Okay. So if you invite dialogue, if you have a post and you invite dialogue, right, you kind of got to be open to that dialogue, in my humble opinion. So here's kind of what happened after I saw that post, engaged with the full video, watched the full video. I started privately. I DM'd this physical therapist. I was not accusatory. I was not berating her. I told her I respected her work. I was genuinely asking, do you mind clarifying what you mean when you say blah, 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 fill in the blank, right? I had a few questions. She responded and asked me to please bring it to the public comments so others could learn. So I did. I headed to her post and I asked the same things publicly. Are we saying the ilia do not move at all? Or are we saying the movement is exaggerated and clinically insignificant? I clarified terms because in conversations like these, terms matter. I said, are we talking about ilium internal rotation, which is ilium moving on a sacrum? Are we talking about pelvis on femur internal rotation, which is a pelvis moving on a fixed femur? Are we talking about sacral motion on the ilium, which is like nutation and counter nutation? I was just like, let's make sure we're all talking about the same thing while we're fighting in the comments, okay? And eventually, when she replied, what we seemed to get to was that her frustration was really about these movable pelvis models exaggerating the amount of motion at the pelvis and at the ilia, and her belief that they are misleading patients or clinicians because they are lacking context and nuance, okay? And that is a very different claim than the ilia do not rotate. It's anatomically impossible unless the pelvis is fractured. Okay, those are two different things. That is where nuance matters, okay? Because I can engage with, hey, these models exaggerate motion and we need to be careful how we explain it. Great. I can agree that context matters. I can agree that we need to be responsible with patient and clinician education, y'all. But that is different from saying something is anatomically impossible and we are all wrong and we are causing harm to patients by making these videos, okay? Kind of my main takeaway there is if you make a strong claim publicly, right, and you invite conversation publicly, then questions are going to be a part of the deal. You frankly can't ask people into the kitchen and then get mad when it gets hot, okay? And I don't mean that in a cruel way. I really don't. I mean that if we are going to be having these conversations publicly, we've got to expect disagreement, especially when we make such a strong claim. And that disagreement doesn't necessarily mean disrespect. It means dialogue with each other. This is how we learn and grow. At least it should be, okay? So let's talk about the idea of like in the DMs, slide into the DMs, or doing it in the public comment, okay? Because apparently both are wrong. Let me explain. This is kind of where it gets even more interesting in my story, because a few months ago, I had almost the opposite experience. There was another very prominent pelvic floor therapist with, 100,000 something followers who posted a quiz. She made a reel, and then the call to action was take my quiz that would tell people if their pelvic floor was tight or weak, and, by extension, what their course of action should be to do about it, okay? And I shared the reel to my stories, and I said, essentially, I don't agree with this. Like, I can't believe we are still reducing the pelvic floor to tight versus weak. Like, I fight this battle day after day. We got to be better as a profession, and we just have to start asking why the pelvic floor symptoms are there, not saying that your pelvic floor is tight and so you need to relax and stretch, or your pelvic floor is weak and you need to strengthen and do Kegels, okay? And I still stand by that. The pelvic floor should not be reduced to tight or weak. I have made multiple podcast episodes about this. I have an entire course that teaches how to actually find the root cause of pelvic floor dysfunction. And I have thousands of social media posts about things like this, okay? So I stand by that. The pelvic floor should not be reduced to tight or weak. And it definitely should not be reduced to a quiz telling you which one yours is without a full patient history and assessment, clinical reasoning, context, nuance, okay? So I shared it to my stories, posted my opinion about it, closed my phone, and I went about my day. That specific day, I was doing a career fair at my kid's school that morning, and then I had patients booked back to back all day long. So I didn't check Instagram until around 5 p.m. When I opened it, I kid you not, I had an unread DM from her, the original poster. I had, over 10, maybe 20 DMs from just other people. Some people calling me out that how dare I share her thing and quote, tear her down publicly in my stories. Other people telling me thank you for talking about this. Other people also sending me a reel that she had posted calling out, quote, mean girl energy and naming me by name at the end of it. She literally said my name at the end of this. Okay. And, I just had to laugh a little because in that case, I was told I should have DM'd her privately instead of sharing publicly. That's what she told me in the DM that I didn't check all day, which is why she spiraled and made this post calling me a mean girl because I hadn't read or replied to her DM. Sorry, I was busy. I was with patients and my kid all day. So it's just like, which is it? With the Ilium post, I started privately in the DMs and I was told to take it public into the comments, right? Which one is it? My main point is I think sometimes the issue is not whether we DM privately or do a public comment or share. I think sometimes, or a lot of times, the issue is that people don't like being challenged. Ooh, how's that feel? Check in, y'all. I'm going to say it again. I think the issue is not whether we DM privately or publicly comment or share our opinion, y'all. I think the issue is that a lot of times people don't like being challenged. They don't like being challenged. So if I DM, I should have commented. If I comment, I should have DM'd, right? At some point, we have to ask whether the method of communication is really the problem. And we have to look inward at why we are getting triggered and refusing to hear these other sides and engage in professional dialogue, okay? So I want to talk about how challenging an idea is not the same as attacking a person, because this is important. And I want to be really clear here. I am not saying I have always gotten this perfect. Y'all, I am direct. I have strong opinions. Shocker. I know my tone is not everyone's cup of tea. But I also think we have started confusing disagreeing with attacking, okay? If I say, I do not believe the pelvic floor should be reduced to tight versus weak, that's not the same thing as saying this person who posted this reel is stupid. If I say, I don't believe Kegels are necessary ever, that's not the same as saying every clinician who has ever prescribed a Kegel is terrible. If I say we need to be careful with absolute claims about pelvic motion, that's not the same as saying I hate the person who made the post, okay? I am interested in the narrative. I am interested in frameworks of clinical reasoning. I am interested in what this does to our patient care, to how we think through our cases. And ultimately, I am interested in the role that I play in shaping this field, the field of pelvic health, for the better, y'all. We are allowed to challenge narratives that we believe are outdated or incomplete. How else would anything in this world advance if no one ever raised their hand and said, I'm confused. Can you tell me more? And then engaged in dialogue about it, right? Our patients deserve better than reductionist thinking. They deserve clinicians who can zoom out, ask better questions, find the root cause, instead of just trying to treat these symptoms in isolation and staying, digging our heels in to the way that we've always done it, okay? And it begs the question, would we treat each other like this in person, right? I keep asking myself, would we act like this in person? Would we? If we were all at a conference together, would we roll our eyes at each other, make a rebuttal speech, call someone a mean girl, and refuse to engage their actual question? Or would we say, interesting. Tell me more about what you mean by that. Would we say, I think we might be using different definitions. Can we clarify? Would we say, you know what? I disagree, but I think I see where you're coming from. Can we talk about it? And this is not new, you guys. I've had other weird experiences beyond these two with professional online spaces before. Years ago, I was in a very popular online pelvic floor Facebook group. And one day I went to ask a question, get help with a case, something like that. And I couldn't find the group. And I DM'd one of my colleagues and I said, hey, did they delete this Facebook group? Like I was trying to get in and, look something up, ask a question, but I'm not seeing it whenever I search. Did they delete it? Did they change the name? And she was like, nope, I see it. I'm still in it. And so I realized I had been removed from it without warning or explanation. And I do have my suspicions about why I was removed from it, which don't really matter. But to make a long story short, I had just started promoting a service. So I started promoting that I was now doing business coaching for pelvic floor clinicians. Again, this was a few years ago, and it was shortly after that I got removed from that group without being told why. And that's literally the only thing I can think of is that they also offer business coaching and maybe saw that I was starting to offer that and wanted me out of that group to not take clients. I don't know for sure, again, because I was never told. And it just makes me think, what the heck are we doing, y'all? Why are we acting like this? Why are we acting like we're in middle school and not just talking to people like humans? I don't know. I'm beating a dead horse at this point. But the main point here is that the internet gives us this false sense of safety, right? We get brave behind the keyboard, behind the screen, but there is still a human being on the other side that we are talking to. So to just bring it all back, right? Here is what I want us to remember. We can have strong beliefs without losing our humanity, y'all. We can challenge each other without humiliating each other. We can ask hard questions without assuming bad intent. And we can be questioned without becoming defensive, right? If we want to change the game in pelvic health, which I do, this matters because better patient care comes from curiosity, humility, evidence, clinical reasoning, your own experience with your patients, and a willingness to say, I don't know it all, okay? All of that is what's going to help you grow individually as a clinician, but also our field grow and move beyond this outdated line of thinking. And, honestly, if our belief cannot withstand a clarifying question, maybe we need to examine the belief, okay? So here's my challenge for all of us, myself included. Before you post the rebuttal reel, ask, am I responding to the actual point or am I reacting to feeling embarrassed and called out? Okay. Before you comment with sarcasm, ask, would I say this to this person's face? Before you go and turn off the comments, ask, did I invite dialogue that I was not actually prepared to have? And before you decide someone is being mean, ask, are they attacking me? Or are they challenging an idea that I have, right? Y'all, we are better together, but better together does not mean we will always agree. It means we are committed to staying human while we disagree so that we can all work towards the common goal of being better and elevating our field and helping our patients, okay? So you guys, if this episode resonated with you, please send it to a pelvic health friend who has also watched the internet lose its mind in the comment section. All right, get your popcorn. We all know that. And come find me on Instagram at Dr. Becky Pelvic PT. I would love to hear your thoughts respectfully, obviously. And you can DM me. You can comment. Either one. I'm open. I am open. But let's keep changing the game, you guys. But let's not destroy each other while we do it. Okay?